Hello and a very warm welcome to the late breaking F1 podcast presented by Sam Sage and me, Ben Hocking, reviewing the British Grand Prix. A Grand Prix where we had George Russell have the lead, Lando Norris have the lead, and then finally Lewis Hamilton have the lead for his 9th British Grand Prix win. We started out dry, it got to intermediate conditions, Sam, it then got dry again. This was, I feel like, every single typical British Grand Prix rolled into one.
Crikey. I mean, what a typical British response you got there from me in one word.
Very true.
What a race we saw. What a race we saw. When we heard about the premise of rain possibly appearing at the Grand Prix, you know, the way that the British summertime could go from being absolutely bloody soaking wet, as it's happened outside my house in the last afternoon, to being scorching hot and drying instantaneously, combined with cars driving over 200 miles an hour through sweeping corners, with gravel traps on either side. You think we're going to have a great time. And you know what? Silverstone once again bloody delivered. It absolutely slapped. What a Grand Prix we just saw today, Ben.
Absolutely, which does give us plenty to talk through on today's episode. We'll have a look at our moment of the race and the moment of the race from some of our Discord submissions as well. A tough day for Ferrari, just Carlos Sainz scoring for them in 5th place. Max Verstappen making his way to the podium in 2nd, a 3rd and a 4th for McLaren. But let's naturally start with the Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton. Started on the front row of the grid, outqualified by his teammate. It's been a difficult spell for him at the Mercedes team, at least compared to his lofty expectations. By far the longest gap between wins in his career. We have to go all the way back to the end of the 2021 season, the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, for the last time he took victory. But today, though, Sam managed those soft tyres in the last stint and saw off Max Verstappen by about 2 seconds. How impressed were you about Hamilton's win? Someone who has obviously had a lot of success, but has come under fire at times in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, over 2.5 years since his final victory in Formula One took place at the Saudi Grand Prix. And since that time, his teammate, George Russell, has won twice, of course, winning in Brazil and then winning earlier on this week, essentially, in Austria. Russell had regularly been kind of the guy in the right place at the right time, deploying the pace when it was needed, out-qualifying Lewis Hamilton a lot this season, and did it again at the British Grand Prix, of course, this weekend, securing pole position away from Lewis Hamilton, who joined him on the front row by about a 10th.5. And I'm sure Lewis Hamilton got out of the car on Saturday and was kicking himself a little bit. I'm sure he thought, okay, amazing that we're on the front row, both cars, but I would have loved a pole here. And once the race got underway, the first maybe 15 laps or so, Russell was doing a fantastic job at extending that lead. You know, I think the gap got up to about 1.8, 1.9 seconds, and Russell looked really comfortable. But then Lewis Hamilton did what Lewis Hamilton does so well, and that is deliver in uncertain, uncontrollable conditions where you've got to make things count. It wasn't all plain sailing, of course, because he managed to get past his teammate and drive off into the distance a little bit. And then all of a sudden, both McLarens decided to come back at him, and he faced another challenge in the sense that another team was going up against him. They had to pit. They had to make the right call to pit. Of course, we saw Piastri staying out for an extra lap, which dropped him all the way down to P6 at the time before Russell then retired. But what was the most impressive thing was the way that Lewis Hamilton famously hates rubber. He hates tyres. He bemoans them at every opportunity, criticises them at every chance that he gets. And yet, when he needs them most, when he caresses through the final stages of that Grand Prix, he nurtures them, he grows them, and they deliver for him. He made those soft tyres sing. I was really shocked at how much life he got out of those soft tyres, because Max Verstappen was arriving fast on those hard tyres. I think that was the right call for tyres. I think a medium or a hard tyre was the right call. And the moment that Verstappen got past Lando Norris just disappeared. He was unable to hold on behind him. He was unable to stay in the DRS. He couldn't close the gap to Hamilton before he got past. And he essentially became a non-entity in that fight for the win in the final 5 or 6 laps, and actually ended up much closer to Piastri than he did to that fight for the lead. So the way that Lewis Hamilton extended those soft tyres, he eked out the pace, he kept the gap to Verstappen to 3 seconds until 2 laps from the end. It just shows you that whilst Hamilton has come under fire, he has come under pressure, he's come under some criticism, rightly so. The old man's still got it. And to see him cross that line, emotional, crying his eyes out, hear Bono crying his eyes out, hear it looks like the whole British crowd crying their eyes out over a 40-year-old man winning a race around a circle over 50-odd laps. It shows you how much it means to him, how much he cares about it. And it was a real moment. The first guy ever to win 9 Grand Prix at one single location. History was made today. And I hope you all enjoyed it, because I absolutely loved it. I thought it was a fantastic Grand Prix, and we got a really fantastic end to it. I thought it was a brilliant, brilliant Sunday.
It was an exceptional performance by Lewis Hamilton, someone I've been quite critical of, certainly this season, but also at times in the last couple of years. As we say, it's been a while since he took a Grand Prix victory, and granted, the car hasn't exactly been there for him to win most of those Grand Prix, but even so, Lewis Hamilton hasn't had a plain sailing couple of years, but today he was in that Lewis Hamilton zone. The very top drivers seem to have, the likes of himself, the likes of Verstappen. When he gets in that zone, he is very difficult to beat. And yes, he was out-qualified by George Russell, and I think we have now reached the stage of his career where that's probably going to become the norm. As a prediction for next year, I think Charles Leclerc, regardless of what the points look like, I think Charles Leclerc will out-qualify Lewis Hamilton, because I don't think he has that absolute one-lap raw pace that he had a few years ago. But in terms of ongoing race pace, in terms of the consistency, in terms of tyre wear, as much as he hates tyres, he's very good at it. He is very good at tyre wear. I don't believe those soft tyres were fit for purpose in terms of a race tyre. Obviously, they were fine in qualifying, but as a race tyre, I don't think they were really working. Lando Norris proved that. The way that Lewis Hamilton was able to manage the gap out front, supremely impressive. And you say, the early stint where he was behind George Russell, yes, he did look relatively comfortable in front, but actually Lewis Hamilton looked relatively comfortable in second. He knew rain was on the way. He knew that race was not going to be won and lost in that first stint. I think Lewis Hamilton was biding his time, knowing that an opportunity might well come when the rain starts to come down. We know he was running a higher downforce package compared to George Russell. That ultimately helps him when the rain comes around. And they were just able to execute exactly when they needed to. This was a great performance. And you talking about the emotion that he had at the end of that race. We've heard Lewis Hamilton be emotional before on team radio, but generally speaking, it's been more jubilance, I think is probably the right word. We hear him when
he cheese himself up, doesn't he?
Yeah, when he's won quite a few world championships at this point. When he's won world championships, he's come across the team radio and he's been ecstatic, right? Here, this was sheer relief. Like, this was 2.5 years weight off his shoulders that he was finally able to, in front of his home crowd, no less. I'm pretty sure it would have been an emotional response regardless of where it happened. And he knows, and I know they all count the same wins, but he did it on pure pace. He did it on pure pace, pure skill, great team management. He didn't luck into a win here. I think he deserves all his flowers for the performance out there today. I'm sure there are some that will try and take it away from him, but this was exceptional.
Yeah, you're right. It was exceptional, and we were live streaming throughout the race. And even the Verstappen fans, who have every right to have their rivalry, were being incredibly complimentary, very, very kind, saying how well he had driven, how the gap that Verstappen had brought the gap down to those final laps wasn't enough, and how well he nurtured those tyres. And he displayed why he is considered one of the greatest of all time in a race like today. And when you think the last time he won a Grand Prix was essentially when he had that World Championship removed from his grasp. Essentially, right? Saudi Arabia Grand Prix was the penultimate race of the 2021 season, and we go into Abu Dhabi, and of course, all those memories of Verstappen and Hamilton coming together in that final moment. That's the last time he tasted success. That's the last time that he remembers being on the top spot, to then finally replenish that and get that moment back. I'm happy for him, and I loved his emotion towards it. I really think F1 will benefit from this massively, I think.
His teammate was obviously in the fight for a good chunk of the Grand Prix, but very unexpectedly, I know all retirements are somewhat unexpected, but it was very much out of the blue, wasn't it? How he dived into the pits, and questions were about, was this strategy, because there was no indication that he was going to retire from a mechanical reason. But of course, George Russell won last week, as you've already referenced, not far off winning again. How disappointed is he going to be to see his teammate on the top step of the podium?
I just want to call out George Russell first for once again being such a good sports person. Immediately congratulating Lewis Hamilton. I know it's not world champions. It's not like Lewis has won the world title and Lewis has lost it. It's a race win. And George had one last week. So I'm sure he's a little bit less frustrated if he hadn't had that race win last week, if this was his only chance. But well done to him, because I always think that's lovely. George was electric. George was fantastic. His qualifying pace was sublime. The way he held on to that top four, even when he was faltering a little bit with that wet weather when it came down, he was still in the fight, comfortably in the fight. It did start to unravel a little when we had the intermediate pit stop and he came up behind Max Verstappen. He was right in front of Carlos Sainz. It looked like it was just starting to falter for him. But nonetheless, I think if he got to the end of the Grand Prix, he would still very much be in the mix for that victory. He's going to be gutted. Any race driver is going to be gutted. When you see your teammate go on to win, especially one that started behind you in the Grand Prix, you're going to sit there and think, I could have won that race. That could be my Grand Prix. I should have won at home. And he's never qualified in the top 5 until Saturday, until yesterday. So this is a real weekend of a real month of firsts for George Russell, really. So he'll kick himself a little bit, but he knows that one, it's not his fault. He didn't crash the car. He didn't cost himself in any way, I don't think. It's a failure within the car. It's a DNF that he can't control. And sometimes in Formula One, you just go, can't do anything about it. Nothing I could do. And I think that helps him. I think that helps him a lot. 2, he'll know that his pace was good. He'll know that he was very competitive, and he could take that into whatever weekend we go to next in terms of where the Mercedes might be competitive and reapply it. I think if he was driving around in first by 15 seconds and he had that failure, he'd kick himself. Equally, I think if he was driving around in 10th place and Lewis was winning, he'd go, what was I doing wrong? What was the matter with my performance? He drove a great weekend. He had some bad luck. It happens. He's reacted to it brilliantly. That's all you can do. It's all you can get out of it.
Yep, sometimes it is just racing. It was a good performance from Russell. I was a bit disappointed with the way he seemed to lack pace when the rain started to come down versus his direct rivals. That was a bit of a shame, but equally, if you take that away and you just look at everything else that he did, it was a good performance from him. He would have been in the mix. And look, I mean, at times where, you've got Ferrari strategically getting things wrong and only one driver in the points, and you've got Red Bull only one driver in the points, the fact that George Russell can look at his own performance and say, look, I'm not the cause for the fact that we don't have 2 drivers up there today. He can take solace from that. I know he obviously won last week. I don't actually think that will help or hinder how much it will hurt nonetheless, because this was an opportunity for him to win his home Grand Prix. I don't think the fact that he won last week is actually going to help him or I don't know, make it less of a pain. But yeah, it's still a good performance from him. What about McLaren, Sam? They were at one point first and second in this Grand Prix. They finished third and fourth. How much did they let this get away from them?
I actually think it all started from the start. I don't think Lando Norris's start was very good again. And this is becoming a little bit of a reoccurring problem for Lando Norris, and something that he needs to go away and work on, because McLaren...
Sorry, when you say the start, do you mean his getaway, or you're talking about strategically how he managed the first part of the lap?
To be honest, both. And I think both need to be called out, because he gets jumped by Verstappen, right? And then, it takes time for him to rebuild the distance between the two of them. He falls back a little bit and Piastri's right behind him, and then he catches back up and gets the move done. Great. But because he's been jumped by Verstappen right at the very start, it means that I actually think the McLaren was probably the fastest race car today, and has been for many a Grand Prix. I think that McLaren is up there as a real race winner contender for a lot of these races. And time again, the reason why McLaren aren't going through and winning races is because the drivers aren't, and the strategies aren't delivering. They're not being ruthless. They're not being cutthroat. They're not elevating themselves to the top level. And when you think all of a sudden, well, McLaren have a 1-2 all of a sudden. They've managed to not luck their way into it, because both Norris and Piastri drove through those difficult conditions fantastically well to get back past Hamilton and Russell. And Piastri did well as well to get back past them both. You think, right, you're now in the driver's seat, no pun intended. You're able to execute something here. They set Piastri round for another lap, costs him massively, ends up being in 6th place. I don't know why double stat wasn't on. Even if Piastri backed up by a couple of seconds on that lap, there was the ability to do that, and they decided not to. Mercedes executing a brilliant double stack. Yes, okay, Russell ending up behind Verstappen, but at least he was still in that fight. There's only a couple of seconds between them. By the time that the McLarens got back round, Norris was only 4 seconds behind Piastri. It would have been worth waiting in the pit lane for a couple of seconds. So that was frustrating. That was a bad call, in my opinion. And then Norris, just for some reason, was unable to be ruthless enough when it counted to get the job done time and time again. He mistakenly misses his own pit box. He slides into his pit box. Every other driver up and down the grid hits their marks with no problem. And Piastri does the same thing in the box. Hits his marks with no problem. Norris has a lot to learn. The raw talent is exceptional. Absolutely exceptional. And he's up there with one of the best. But time and time again, we are seeing that it's his own mistakes that are costing him from going from being one of the very, very, very good drivers to an elite, a winner, a guy that's going to challenge the likes of Max Verstappen at his peak. And he needs to fine-tune. He needs to tweak things. I've got a lot of love for Lando, but he just needs that little bit more tweaking and learning, I think, because that race should have been on his. He cooked his tyres at that last sector, the last portion of the race. If Hamilton made them work, Norris should be able to make them work. They're the same tyres, right? It's not like they're any difference. The cars are set up relatively the same. You should be able to get those tyres to then, not end up being 8 seconds behind Lewis Hamilton coming into the Grand Prix. I was surprised at the difference between them both. So I think as much as the strategy wasn't perfect, I think it was Lando Norris today that cost them winning this Grand Prix.
McLaren, and I include driver, strategy, team, everything in that. You fumbled bad. You bottle job that was bad. That was really bad. Like I say, they were in first and second at one stage in this Grand Prix, and I agree with your assessment that they had the fastest car on the day. And when a fastest car comes away with third and fourth place, you can only count that as a disappointment. Yes, they have got 2 cars in the fight, unlike all of their other rivals, but it should have been better. It continually feels like, and again, I'm not just placing this on driver, I'm not just placing this on team, I think it's collective here. They are being given a real opportunity by Red Bull to catch up. And they are somewhat catching up, but they're not doing it as quickly as they could have done in the last few Grand Prix. If you think, Max Verstappen and Red Bull are walking away with 18 points today, McLaren will take away 27, so they've beaten them by 9. It should have been more than 9. And this is a continuing story that they are essentially, through Sergio Perez not scoring many points whatsoever, Red Bull are handing them a full cake, and McLaren are going, great, I'll have that slice. It's like, no, take the whole thing. You're just taking a very small amount of what you could do. I agree with your reckoning on where this went wrong. I think Norris and Piastri both showed good pace early on in the Grand Prix. It took them a little while, particularly Norris, to get into it, but they definitely got there by the end of that first stint that they had. You have to double stack. That was an awful call to let Piastri go round again. Even if Piastri doesn't slow up, and he is still, and I think what Piastri was trying to do basically is, I need to get by Lando Norris on this lap so I'm first in the box. Completely fair. Even if he goes, right, I'm actually not going to slow up at all, and I am going to follow him into the pits 3 tenths behind him, that is still way quicker than going around once more. Sure, the sensible thing would have been, at that point, for him to drop back a couple of seconds and then double stack, similar to what Mercedes did. Even if he doesn't do that, he has lost so much time. Conditions can go like that in an instant. And we saw that on that lap that Piastri was the only one who was really struggling around on those dry tyres. If you're that worried about not double stacking them, put one of them in the lap before Lando Norris came in. I actually think they all came in a lap too late.
I agree. I completely agree with you. I think that the way that Piastri got sold out, essentially, what was that call all about? He could have sat in the pit lane for an extra 15 seconds if there was a problem with Norris's pit stop, and still would have been further up the grid. They're lucky that Hulkenberg and the like were so far back. He only just came out in front of Hulkenberg when he finally got the tyres on.
Yeah, I was very disappointed about that. And then, the last pit stop. This is an error from both driver and team. Lando Norris has a 4.5 second pit stop. That is firmly on Lando Norris. He has not stopped on his mark, and as a result of that, he has added probably an extra 2 seconds, if not maybe even a little bit more, to his pit stop time. What was the gap between Norris and Hamilton when he came out the pits? 2 seconds.
Yeah.
That is the difference between him, going ahead of Lewis Hamilton or being a couple of seconds behind. And that left him vulnerable to Max Verstappen. Who knows? Even if he comes out ahead and Lewis Hamilton has better pace and Lewis Hamilton gets by him, by the time that happens, he might have enough of a gap to Verstappen to stay ahead of him. That is...
What was the gap between Hamilton and Verstappen when they crossed the line at the end?
Barely
2
anything.
seconds. It was 2 seconds.
Yeah.
So that would have been the gap that Norris would have needed, at least being second place. I think Hamilton had the pace on Norris at the end anyway. I think he was better. But my point is, you're right. He would have had a chance at winning that Grand Prix.
And I'm sorry to go in on McLaren here. Another issue is the fact they went on those soft tyres. That was an awful call. I appreciate only 2 drivers started on the softs, those being Zhou Guanyu and Esteban Ocon, and I appreciate pace-wise they are a long way away from the McLaren duo. However, those 2 drivers were slow as balls. They were awful on those tyres. They should have gone nowhere near the soft compound. Lewis Hamilton, this is why I think Lewis Hamilton did such a great job on them, because I don't think they were the right tyre to be on. They had brand new medium tyres. That was absolutely the right call. Piastri proved that lap after lap. Why this is a continuing problem where they will ask their drivers, and I appreciate you want to get information from your drivers. It'd be stupid not to. But there are times where you just need to make the call. You are the one with the data. Make the call yourself based on the information you've got in front of you. They should have been on the medium tyres. Lando Norris and the team have thrown away a better result here. Oscar Piastri, I think, has had a great race, and I think he does not deserve to be 4th. A real shame for them.
I think a prime example of what you've just spoken about with driver team making the call on tyres was, and I want to compliment him because he was fantastic, was Max Verstappen when he made the call for intermediates. You heard them come over the radio and go, "Great shout on intermediates that lap, Max. Nailed it. We're back in the race." And that's because when it's getting wetter, the guy driving the car is the one that will be able to tell you, we're not going anywhere. This is the wrong tyre. I feel this is wrong. And he made the call to go on to the intermediates that lap, and it was bang on. He got himself from being a distant 4th, 5th position straight up there again with the leaguers. And that's why he's a world champion. That's why he leads the way he does. And that's why he's so successful, because he knows the right call to make. And also, most of the time, trusts his team to make the other calls, makes the other shouts, knows the data. They are cohesive. They are one as a unit. McLaren, it's a while ago now, but we saw Norris do it in Russia, didn't trust the tyre call, made the wrong mistake, cost him a race win. It's coming back to bite them again, and it's happened time and time again with other teams. So you need to be, as a team, dictating what your driver does. As you said, they can see what the other 19 drivers are up to. They can see what the weather's doing. They can see if tyres are wearing or what other guinea pigs are up and down the track. Perez starting on hards, for example. He'd have got the first, 15 laps or whatever it was on the hards, and they know the data. They go, those were great tyres. We're going to use them later. Max Verstappen went onto the hards at the end. I almost think it worked for them. I think it's actually Lewis Hamilton that was the difference between the two, not the hard tyre. So that's where you have to trust your team. The team has to be assertive. I think McLaren are floundering now. They found themselves at the front. I think they've almost forgotten a little bit how to make sure they need to win when it comes down to them making the right or wrong call.
Okay, let's take our first break on this episode. On the other side, we've got a bit more chat on Max Verstappen. So we saw Max Verstappen obviously qualified on the second row of the grid, made the move on Lando Norris quite early on in the race, but it became quite clear very quickly that he didn't seem to have a great deal of pace, at least early on in this race. Lando Norris obviously gets by him. He then drops back to 5th place, at which point Carlos Sainz is very quickly catching him. He's walked away with a 2nd place here and was obviously very good in the final stint. What did you make of his race? It was odd to see Red Bull struggling as much as they did.
Really odd to see them struggling as much as they did. I know that obviously during the qualifying session, Max Verstappen damaged his floor, and overnight they replaced it with a like-for-like spec of floor. We are not engineers on this podcast, right? It's not why you come to this show, but that definitely might have provided some difference in what his race ability could have shown. The fact that he was able to qualify 4th with a damaged chassis tells me that, hey, the guy's clearly got pace around here. And I even said on our live stream, watch Max Verstappen. I think now he's got a fully repaired car. I really do think like he's going to be a considerable threat for this Grand Prix. And that very quickly went the other way. He fell away into the race. And it was very unusual to see not just George Russell, but Lewis Hamilton in 2nd place, maintaining a 2-3 second gap to Max Verstappen. It's almost unheard of over the last year and a half. So very peculiar that the Red Bull was unable to perform around here. Obviously, Sergio Perez went nowhere, and I'm sure we'll get onto that. But the way he changed his strategy, the way he was so proactive in making those calls, and then the way he utilized that hard tire in comparison to his two competitors in front on the soft tire, it was him that made the difference again. I really do think that car was not tip top. I really do think that car was unable to compete, especially with the McLaren, but seemingly the Mercedes as well, because I think the conditions really suited Mercedes this weekend. I think the cooler temperatures, a little bit damp, I think that works perfectly for Mercedes. They did the same in Canada. It was a bit colder in Canada. Obviously, we saw George Russell get poled and they picked up that first podium. I'm a little bit worried for Mercedes later on down the line when we get to the hotter stuff. I think they might start to struggle a little bit. But it was all Max Verstappen today. I think he was, again, the difference maker. And I think that his pace to still be in it at the end of the Grand Prix shows you why Max Verstappen is Max Verstappen and why he's got that many race wins and those world titles. Because I don't think many other drivers would have kept that Red Bull fighting for a second place, if not a win. It was a really good drive from him.
You have to say, on yesterday's qualifying review, I was, as turns out, wrong. I was worried that the Mercedes would not be able to keep up race pace. I thought it was going to create an interesting Grand Prix. I figured Lando Norris and Max Verstappen in third and fourth would have a bit of a pace advantage on Russell and Hamilton in first and second. And I think Norris got there, at least, on that first stint. I think he eventually showcased that was maybe somewhat true. Not for Max Verstappen. And I feel like we've got to a point now with the Red Bull team because, again, Sergio Perez is so frequently not in the same fight as Max Verstappen or even really close. Perez spent the first stint stuck behind other cars, not really being able to make many overtakes. It's difficult to know Verstappen's pace based on not having that Perez comparison. Like, we don't know if Sergio Perez does qualify in that top 10 and he's, let's say, 6th place, somewhere around where Sainz was. Is he having the same struggles early on as Verstappen does? Is this driver-led? Is it car-led? It's very difficult to know. It was a surprise to me to see him so slow. Based on what Verstappen usually does. Of course, he wasn't outright slow. But at least comparatively, it was a real shock. I think he did, he managed to eventually get back into that fight when the 4 cars ahead were starting to slow each other down a little bit as they were kind of going back and forth from positions. But yeah, I was surprised. In terms of Red Bull and Verstappen's strategy, they absolutely nailed it. I think if you'd have got 15 laps into this race, and you'd have said to Verstappen, okay, Max, you can either keep racing and see if you can win, or we can take P2. What do you... He'd be like, P2, yeah, that's good. Or at least he should have done, because that he did not at any point in that early stage of that Grand Prix look like he had the pace to finish on the podium, let alone in the top 2. And yeah, I think what he did on the hard tyre, he was clearly on the right tyre, compared to the soft at least. The medium might have been a little bit better. But yeah, he, I think as he crossed the line, 18 points, that's not too bad at all for where he was looking.
It's what we used to say about Lewis Hamilton, wasn't it? It's the consistency. If you're having a bad day, your bad day turns into second place on the podium. That's what world champions are made of.
Yeah.
He walks away, he's extending his championship lead again. Had a terrible race day. Didn't qualify the top 3. Looked like he was struggling. Got overtaken by all of his key competitors. Finishes in front of all of them. Lewis Hamilton's 7th in the championship. Who cares what he's doing? Oh, I've got a win. Cool. I'm ahead further in the championship, mate. When it comes to Abu Dhabi, I'm the one lifting the trophy. He's happy. He'll walk away totally fine from this. He did what a world champion does, and that is get the points in the bag and walk away onto the next one. A win is a nice thing to have. The guy is smashing it out the park. So another 3 points on Lando Norris.
There is a very realistic chance that for the rest of this season, he does not have a worse 2-race stretch than what he's just had Austria to Silverstone.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that as an insult to Verstappen in any way, by the way. Obviously, he had the pace to be competitive in Austria before the crash he had with Lando Norris. Here, he's finished a couple of positions ahead of where he probably should have done. Again, some of that credit absolutely goes to Verstappen. But there is a very realistic chance, based on what we've seen from him in the last few years, that he will not struggle like that again. And yet, none of his rivals have made ground on him. Sure, he might not have made much of an advantage either, but when you're that far ahead in the championship, who cares?
Who cares?
Yeah. Again, that's why he's so good.
That is, and he deserves all the plaudits for it. And I was saying that on the stream, that the level of drive that he put in today, he elevated that Red Bull. That Red Bull was not a second place car today. It did not deserve him to be on the podium. He was the difference maker. And as much as Lewis Hamilton was sublime, so exceptional, and it was a wonderful moment, we say this all the time. There are several drivers up and down the grid that do deserve that credit. And it's nice to give Max Verstappen credit for something that isn't being 10 seconds down the road. He really drove well.
What are your thoughts on his teammate? Because obviously he started from the pit lane, which was always going to compromise his race. He was due to start on the back row of the grid, so it made sense for him to take that penalty. He makes a few early moves, but after making a couple of moves, he was stuck behind other cars when this was still dry conditions. He is then one of the drivers to make that early move onto the intermediate compound, which absolutely did not work, which essentially ruined his race and anyone else's race from that point onwards. How do you read his Grand Prix as a result of that?
Don't put yourself at the back in the first place, mate. As simple as that. I think, we do Big Brain Strat, which we're coming up to. Big Brain Strat for me is giving Sergio Perez a 2-year deal. What an absolute joke. I'm sorry, but that qualifying was embarrassing. Beached it. Everyone else manages to go around. I know there's a few mistakes made, but he's the only one that beaches it. He ends up having to start at the back of a racetrack that could be so hit or miss with if you can pass, right? It could be so difficult sometimes to follow.
Tough.
There was stuff. If you set up your car, we saw Charles Leclerc sat behind Lance Stroll, for example, for ages. And obviously, Leclerc was another person affected by the poor strategy call. And I think it was exactly that. I think it was a really poor strategy call. I think that both driver and team are responsible for that kind of strategy call in this race. We heard some drivers dictating the kind of the field of play. We heard some teams dictating the field of play. Sergio Perez is experienced enough to sit there and go, I don't think we're there yet. Other drivers are making it round. Other drivers are making it work. Drivers with far less experience were doing a much better job than Sergio Perez. I really think in those kind of conditions, you should look to those with experience to go, hey, I can make some passes here. Drivers are falling off the racetrack. I can get into consistent laps. I can move my way up. This was not a boring Grand Prix where everyone sat processionally, going around with each other. He had opportunity to make moves here, and he didn't. He permanently stayed towards the back of that grid. I know the car wasn't a race-winning car, but the race car was also more than good enough for a top 6, top 8 finish, I think, from the back of that grid today. I think opportunities could have been made, and he got nowhere. He went nowhere. So whilst I think there were some mitigating circumstances, I do put the predominant blame on Sergio Perez for not getting a result out of this.
Hugh Bird over Team Radio, of course, Perez's race engineer, straight after the Grand Prix said that it was worth the gamble to go onto the intermediate compound. I 100% agree with him. I know it didn't work. It definitely didn't work. It was nowhere near working. I still think it was the right idea to go onto them, because at that point, what on earth have you got to lose? What have you got to lose? For Charles Leclerc, and we'll get on to Ferrari a little bit later on in the episode, for Charles Leclerc, it was a stupid call, because there are still points to be gained for him in this race. He was in a solid position. He had, as you say, just passed Lance Stroll. He still had an opportunity, if there's a safety car or something like that, to get back in the fight with the drivers ahead of him. For him, it was stupid. For Sergio Perez, we saw he was making no progress. He was making no progress after he'd got by, I think, Zhou and Ocon, and that was about it. And I think he was stuck behind Kevin Magnussen and Daniel Ricciardo for quite a long time. Through strategy, might he have got up to P10? Maybe. I don't know. But for the gain of 1 point, I think you might as well just go for it. And if you get it right, you are propelled way up the field at that point. So I agree with the Red Bull strategy call, even though it didn't work. When Sergio Perez has put himself in such a position where they have nothing to lose because they've got nothing in front of them. They've got nothing. Sergio Perez has put them in a position where, qualifying wise, they haven't got points to lose. So I thought it was fine.
I think that's my problem with it. The fact that he put himself in that position where they have to make a call where, hey, you've put us in such a bad position to start with, but we may as well try some outlandish, reckless, bold choice to see if we can make the gains back up, because you screwed us in the first half, because you started us so far back that we have to do something over the top to try and get you back in the fight. There's going to be some serious conversations at that team. That qualifying this whole weekend, another weekend, is not good enough.
Now 6th place in the Drivers' Championship, and I believe single digits away are both
7.
Russell and Hamilton.
7 away in total.
And of course, Russell would have been ahead of him if he'd finished this race, you'd have to believe. Should we do driver of the day?
Oh, go on then. Little jingle.
Verdict is in. You're the driver of the day. You're the driver of the day. You're good at driving.
Who's on your list of contenders?
There are a number of drivers. In conditions like this, you do tend to get a few that thrive. I thought that Nico Hulkenberg was brilliant. You know, the way he kept that car in that top 6 area, I thought it was fantastic. Out qualifying both works Ferraris was brilliant. Max Verstappen, I think he was also really, really, really good. I thought Albon had a really great race, getting past Tsunoda towards the end there, finishing in 9th place. Sargent had a good weekend. I thought he was really strong as well. But I'm going to be obvious, and I'm going to give it to Lewis Hamilton. I thought the way he managed, he was always really good, but then that final stint sealed it for me. The way he delivered on those soft tyres was vintage Lewis Hamilton. It's what he does. And it was a real moment for Formula One, I think. So, yeah, driver of the day, Hamilton.
The only other honourable mention that I did want to throw in there is Carlos Sainz. I don't think he could have done much more.
Mr. Consistent, right?
I think 11 points, which was 5th in the fastest lap, that is the absolute pinnacle of what Ferrari could have achieved today, which is an indictment of where Ferrari are, that the fact that that was probably the best they could get. Look, in terms of pure pace, he was comfortably slower than the cars in front, but equally, when we saw the conditions get to, between dry and wet, that was an opportunity for some of the drivers to really, taking away the car performance a little bit and showcasing what you have as your ability as a driver. Carlos Sainz did very well in those conditions. Now, of course, when it got to full inters and it got back to full dries, that's where the car performance takes over again, and you can't do a great deal if your car isn't fast enough to compete with the top 4. But yeah, I thought he had a good performance. My answer is Lewis Hamilton. He was driver of the day. Worst driver of the day.
Get in the bin. Worst driver of the day. Bin. Worst driver of the day. You suck at driving.
Who's on your list for this one?
A few contenders again. Unless I'm mistaken, someone like Zhou Guanyu was just incredibly slow. Slow Guanyu, as maybe we should start calling him. Because did he have a problem, Ben? Fill me in. Have I missed something, or was he just that bad?
Well, he was one of the drivers that started on the soft compound, so
Yes.
he
Pitted early, didn't he?
Yeah, he pit early for a second set of dries, which of course didn't work very well because there was rain on the way. Sauber, they really fumbled that. So
Yeah.
he wasn't very quick anyway. But yeah.
There was a moment on the timing board where George Russell was in the process of retiring and dropping down the timing sheet, and everyone had passed him, and then it just said Zhou Guanyu plus 3 minutes, and I thought, that's a moment in my career I wouldn't want screenshot. So I thought he was having a bad day, personally. Thought Ricciardo was well off the place of his teammate. Just nowhere near him for the entire Grand Prix, but I don't think it was anywhere bad enough to go worst driver of the day. I'm going to give it to Charles Leclerc. I thought that, he took ages to get past Lance Stroll, off of his teammates' pace for for the entire Grand Prix. I think he has every right to stand away from the decision of moving on to the intermediates. We've heard them dictate Ferrari before. We know their strategy is not something to be trusted. And it's almost the same thing as what happened in Canada, right? They got the tyre call wrong because of the weather again. Let him down massively. Points were on the table. Even if they weren't the best points were on the table, and they got absolutely thrown in the bin. So I'm going to give it to Leclerc.
My contenders are Sergio Perez for the reasons that we've just spoken about. I think Kevin Magnussen was poor. I know he made some progress, but equally Hulkenberg showed what that Haas was capable of. I think they were quite comfortably the 6th fastest team on the day, if not the 5th fastest team. So to finish 12th is a disappointment. I'm going to give it to Ricciardo. I was disappointed. He did a good job of getting back in the fight at one stage. Although I think, again, he might have got a bit lucky because strategically he seemed to benefit a bit more than a few of the other cars in front of him. But that last stint, he was nowhere. And he was quite comfortably off Yuki Tsunoda. So I will go Ricciardo.
Fair.
Big brain Strat.
Bob, we're gonna need you to box for wets. What? It's not even raining out. What are you talking about? Yeah, and Bob, if you get a chance, let your teammate pass you. What? He crashed out. He's not even in the race.
obviously with mixed conditions, there's probably quite a few contenders, but what are you going for?
Yeah, I've got two on the cards. One I've just mentioned with Charles Leclerc, but the other one I'm actually going to give it to, which is keeping Oscar Piastri out for the other lap. I really think they absolutely threw away a chance of having both cars on the podium. I think they threw away the chance of having at least one of those cars push for the win. I think it was a devastating move for Piastri. I just think that Piastri's been shafted there, if I'm totally honest. I think he drove a really, really good Grand Prix right with his teammate the entire time, and that's cost him big time. In a race where they're the only contender to have two of their cars inside the top six finish a Grand Prix, they could have. I think a 1-2 was comfy on the cars. And as you said at the start of this podcast, Ben, they fumbled. And I think this was one of the big reasons why that happened. So Piastri having to go another lap round, big brain strike.
I had two contenders. Those were the two. I won't mince my words. They were both rubbish calls. I can't put it any other way. Since you've given it to the Piastri one, I'll give it to the Charles Leclerc one. Again, I don't mind that call if you're Esteban Ocon or if you're in the bottom 25% of the race at that point. Sure, go for it. You've got nothing to lose. Charles Leclerc had finally just made his way past Lance Stroll, and then you've decided to throw it all away. Awful, awful error. We've got to review bold predictions, don't we?
Oh, why? Mine was so bad.
What was yours?
Mine was that Perez would beat Verstappen.
Yeah, that's hang on, let me count.
Oh yeah, you count.
Verstappen,
Have fun. We'll be here a while.
2.
Yep.
Perez 2019, 18, 17.
Yep.
Second and 17th. That's not good out of 10.
No, I think it's not good out of 17. Actually, mate, it's pretty rubbish.
So yeah, that's not right. I was encouraged by Daniel Ricciardo's performance at the Austrian Grand Prix. He must have heard me because he deliberately delivered a bad Grand Prix, so I could be wrong.
What was Harry's? I've forgotten it entirely.
I'm not sure. Maybe we'll hear from Harry a bit later on.
Okay, great.
Right, let's take our second break on this episode. On the other side, we're going to be chatting more about Ferrari and some of the midfield contenders. Ferrari's difficult run of races continues, whereas Lewis Hamilton is triumphantly winning the Grand Prix. Max Verstappen is making another great claim all the way up to second place. McLaren have finished third and fourth. All they get is 11 points. Carlos Sainz finishes in fifth, of course, takes a point for the fastest lap that he pit for late on, but Charles Leclerc is all the way down he recovers to 14th in the end, but really that intermediate decision really cost him. Well, you'd have to say, Sam, on pure pace, he's probably not getting any higher than 6th. This is, again, strategically not a good race for Ferrari, but equally, it's not like they had the car to win it either.
It's like talking to an addict. You know, they recover. You think, they're on the right road. Well done. It must be hard. It must be so difficult to go through that. And I'm 1 week clean. I'm 2 weeks clean. Or, I've given up smoking. I'm a month clean. And this is like Ferrari, right? They had a great run to the start of the season. Oh, we're really knocking down the points. And they think, oh, that poor strategy call, that bad upgrade path, those bad performances, they're sitting on the shelf and they look too tempting. I'm going to have to do it. I'm going to have to I'm going to have to have a ciggy outside. I'm going to have to take another hit. And there they go. Onto the broken track, away from the clean path, and they're just going down another path of just hurting themselves. The upgrades haven't worked. The strategy calls are bad. The pace is going out the window. And whilst McLaren arguably have the fastest car now, whilst Verstappen is delivering time and time again, whilst Mercedes have finally started to understand what's going on and take good steps forward, Ferrari are now closer, it seems, to the back of the top 10 than they are to Red Bull. When a time that Red Bull can't seem to deliver the top car anymore, they should be the natural successors. And yet, you come to a track where at Silverstone, they've had great success many, many times, and they've let themselves down again in a race last time out in Austria, where the leaders take themselves out. Are they the car to pick up the pieces? No, they're not even in the top 2. They fail again. So, why can Ferrari just not consistently deliver something that helps them take good, consistent steps forward? They were so exciting about these upgrades. Do you remember all those months ago now, Leclerc, Sainz come out into the radio? We're going to be up there with Red Bull. We're going to wipe a second off their pace. We're going to be fighting for race wins. Sorry, where is that? Was it 2025 that was coming? Is it a real thing? Is it a fantasy? Have we created a fictional tale? Because where has the pace gone? like Jack Sparrow, where is the rum gone? Well, the rum in this case is pace. So Ferrari haven't got a clue and they don't know where to search for it because they are lost at sea. And I don't know what they're trying to do anymore because they can't seem to get any higher than at best a 4th or 5th place. They are miles away from the lead and the drop-off is quite staggering.
Well, yeah, I mean, the fact that obviously Carlos Sainz finished on the podium at Austria, but it wasn't due to his out-and-out pace. It was the fact that he should have been 5th and 2 cars in front of him took each other out. Yeah, it's not good. This is their pace. I know Leclerc, some of the I don't want to call it a distraction because it's what happened, but obviously Charles Leclerc being out of the points and having a bad strategy call is one thing. But again, it's not like they would have been great if that didn't happen. They would have been very comfortably behind McLaren, very comfortably behind Mercedes, and very comfortably behind Max Verstappen. That they weren't enough. The only reason at one point Carlos Sainz was fairly close to Max Verstappen was because of those mixed conditions. As soon as that stopped again, I know strategically they didn't even get Carlos Sainz's call right, really, because they were a lap late with him on the second go-round. But I think he would have dropped back there anyway. We saw Piastri was all over the back of Carlos Sainz in that middle stint, and that's because McLaren and Piastri are far quicker right now than that Ferrari. And like I said, I put Carlos Sainz as a mention for driver of the day because I do genuinely think he did a very good job. And I don't think this Ferrari has anything more. And we shouldn't be surprised at that because you've got Charles Leclerc, who was running the new spec on Friday, changed over to the old spec yesterday, has been running that for the rest of the weekend. Carlos Sainz is running this old spec car as well. Of course, Ferrari are behind all of these other cars that have made upgrades when they're running a car that is exactly the same pace-wise where it was like 7 races ago. That's what happens in F1. Teams make progress. So if you don't make progress, if you stand still, it will look as if you're going backwards. That's what's happened the last few races. McLaren aren't that far behind now.
Yeah, I think the most frustrating thing for them is that this isn't the one-off. This isn't like they made a bad strategy call and they set the car up wrong. This is now the norm. You're nowhere near. The fact that Haas, I think Hulkenberg, not Magnussen, genuinely was better than both of them. I think if you gave Hulkenberg an equal car, he'd have beaten them both. That's how bad they've become now.
Let's have a look at some of the other midfield contenders. You mentioned Nico Hulkenberg. That is a second consecutive top 6 finish. Now, he didn't get a good start to this Grand Prix, did Hulkenberg, but still managed to make his way back into a strong point-scoring position. And now Haas are not that far behind the Minardi team. It's interesting.
Yeah, you got to give Hulkenberg a round of applause. You remember a couple of seasons ago, out of the sport, people thinking, who's this old timer? Has he still got it in him? He's been away for too long. Not sure he's anything better than a sub now. He is one of the drivers of the season. The performances that he continually puts in are above and beyond what that Haas is capable of. Look at how he's out driving Magnussen. Now, Magnussen is no slouch of a racing driver either. I'm not saying he's up there with the top 10, but he's a good driver. And Hulkenberg is making him look terrible. Genuinely terrible. No wonder Audi wants him because the performances that he's delivering, a car that I do think is not as good as the likes of Minardi, is not as good as the likes as Ferrari. He's up there with them. He's driving with them. He's beating Aston Martins, who were getting regular podiums last season. Remember where Haas were last season? I was mocking them. I called them imposters. I said they didn't even know how tyres work. And now, 2 6th places in a row. The guy, I'm running out of good things to say about him, but it should not go unnoticed just how brilliant Nico Hulkenberg is driving.
Yeah, fair play to Nico Hulkenberg from an individual point of view. Like I say, he had a poor start to the Grand Prix that might well have cost him time in this race because, of course, a lot of the talk is about how Charles Leclerc was stuck behind Lance Stroll. Of course, Hulkenberg was stuck behind both of them. So it definitely cost him in terms of time. It probably didn't cost him in terms of position, let's be honest. I don't think the top 5 were within play. But I want to give some more credit to the Haas team because I actually think pace-wise, they were very good this weekend. And that's why I'm disappointed in Kevin Magnussen finishing 12th, is that I genuinely think that Haas team has overtaken all of its rivals in the midfield. I think it has overtaken Minardi. I think it has overtaken Aston Martin, at least at this point.
You think it's 5th? You think it's the 5th?
Yeah, I do right now. Yeah. Hulkenberg's race pace on Friday in practice looked pretty good. Qualifying yesterday, he was 10ths away from being in the mix of a few drivers in front of him. I think Haas have developed a very good car at this point in the season. I think they do have the potential. If Minardi don't get things together, including their upgrades, they do have the opportunity to get in front of them. And again, I mean, I think they should have had 2 drivers in the fight here. Hulkenberg as well did a very good job in that final stint because he was on the soft compound. I believe both of the cars behind him, both Astons were on the medium. Certainly Stroll was. And as we know, I think the medium was the better compound to be on. Hulkenberg still did enough to hold off Stroll, even though it became quite close in the closing laps. So he deserves respect for that. But yeah, I think this Haas team, last 2 races, I think they've been there.
I mean, I know that everyone loves him, but it has to make you question what Günther Steiner was doing. Because Komatsu has been there as a team leader, for what now? 10 months, 8 months? And he has turned that team around. Remember, 2 years ago, they were slogging it around seconds off the pace at last place in the championship. And now they're beating Aston Martin, who realistically should have had a race win last season. The turnaround is incredible in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, it's always difficult to know as well because, you know, you can look at the uptick in performance this season and just say automatically Komatsu's doing a great job, Steiner wasn't, which might be the case. But equally, as we know, sometimes in F1, you don't get to reap the benefits of decisions that you take until months after they happen. Günther Steiner might well claim, and he might be right to say, he did all the foundational work last year so that they could prosper this year. Again, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but it is difficult to know.
It is, you're right. And that's a fair shout out, and he doesn't immediately deserve to be criticised because you're right, timelines do happen, but there's a lot of coincidences lining up with this immediate tick up in form because there's no extra budget and there's no more people working on that team.
Yes, that's very much true. Williams, 9th and 11th.
One of what, if not their best performance as a team this season.
Yeah.
Logan Sargent was really good. And this comes after James Vowles came out and said that there's a real chance that he could lose his seat midway through the season. And again, as much as it's harsh, maybe on Logan Sargent to hear that, I think James Vowles' honesty in the media is incredibly refreshing. And I think it's good to know that everyone knows where they stand, Logan Sargent included. He has been subpar. He has not been good enough. When the car is now seemingly able to score points, he needs to be there if Albon's doing the job. Albon did do the job. Albon was very, very good today. He delivered. He beat the RB of Tsunoda and, of course, Ricciardo, who was beaten by both Williams drivers. And I think that if another retirement happened, Sargent's in position to pick up some points. So fair play to them. I'm not really sure what more they could have done, realistically. I think maybe Sargent could have been closer to Tsunoda and the like in front, but realistically, it's a tough ask. I think Albon outdrove the car. I think Sargent did a very good job. So we'll see if they can maintain that form or if this was a weird one-off, maybe due to conditions. And of course, Leclerc being out, Perez being out, and then Russell retiring might have benefited them.
For much of the first stint, Alex Albon was not in the DRS of the car in front. I think they were just outside the top 10 at this stage. Alex Albon, for a large chunk of that first stint, was not in the DRS of the car in front. Logan Sargent consistently was in the DRS of Albon. He stuck to the back of Albon for nearly the whole of that first stint. Now, of course, the gap did eventually play out to be much more. However, I agree. I think it was a good performance from Logan Sargent today. Alex Albon was very good as well, and better, obviously, than Sargent based on the finishing position. But Sargent, if Sargent delivers this Grand Prix every single race for his career, he's not in danger. Like this is absolutely fine. And we've never claimed that Logan Sargent needs to be beating Alex Albon. It's always natural to have a best driver at a team. That happens at nearly every team, right? But he was not that far away, and unfortunately we didn't get to see it because there was so much attention on the race at the front towards the end. He overtook Kevin Magnussen in the Haas. Direct fight. They were both on soft tyres. Logan Sargent was behind Magnussen for a few laps. It was looking threatening that he would do something. Sargent then got the move done on Kevin Magnussen. I'm looking forward to seeing that at some point on Twitter or Reddit, I'm sure.
A week's time.
Yeah, right. But yeah, he deserves respect for getting that done. And I think he was slowly catching Yuki Tsunoda towards the end of that race. But yeah, I think he deserves a lot of respect. Well done, Sargent.
Yeah, big up.
Last midfield team that we'll just focus on before our last break. Let's have a quick look at Aston Martin because they've had a difficult run as of late. at least in comparison to some of the other recent results, this would be a step in the right direction. They've got Lance Stroll, who finishes in 7th place for 6 points, Fernando Alonso in 8th for 4 points. What did you make of their 2 races?
I think their blushes were saved by a few external circumstances. I think they both drove good races, and it was interesting to see just how much better Lance Stroll was than Fernando Alonso. Now, to my knowledge, there was no problem with either car, and neither of them ran into serious trouble. Lance Stroll just had the upper hand. Ben, do correct me if I'm wrong there.
Yeah, well, certainly Lance Stroll got a far better start. So he was 3 positions ahead of Fernando Alonso early on. And of course, Stroll was defending from Hülkenberg and from Leclerc. At that point, Alonso was unable to get in that fight, at least early on in that stint. So early, Stroll seemed to have the advantage. As the stint went on, Alonso got quicker to the point where Alonso was on the back of Lance Stroll. But I think what happened was Lance Stroll got the right lap in terms of pitting. Fernando Alonso didn't, and suddenly that gap that was only maybe a second or 2 went to be 10 seconds. I think Alonso then managed to work his way back into it again. But certainly towards the end of the race, when they were both on medium tyres, Stroll did have the upper hand, I think. Alonso wasn't threatening Hülkenberg in the same way that Stroll was.
It was a positive experience for Stroll.
Yeah.
And I think he will look at this Grand Prix very fondly and think, I've done a good job. I don't know what more I really could have got out of this one. Now, I do think when I say, outside circumstances, I mean that Magnussen wasn't quick enough. The RBs haven't got their upgrades working maybe to full force yet. And Tsunoda was the best of the 2. I think he was driving a good race, Ricciardo not so. The Alpines had an absolute nightmare. Gasly barely got going, obviously, as we saw, had a gearbox failure, and Ocon had one of the most non-existent Grand Prix. I don't think I ever saw him appear on the camera.
Oh, he beat Gasly. I thought it was a good performance.
No points, mate, I'm afraid. So, it means nothing. And then, of course, in front of them, Perez, and a muck-up in qualifying, doesn't start around them and doesn't make any progress. Leclerc has a terrible strategy call, falls backwards. George Russell retires. Those are 3 cars that should be in front of them. And if those 3 cars are in front of them, neither of those guys score points. So, for that reason alone, good result for the team. I think this will not be the same next time out. I do not think they'll be able to deliver on this. I do not think this is the car delivering the pace. I think that they rightly benefited, and you have to race what's around you. They can't control that. I'm sure they wouldn't go, oh yeah, put everyone in the race with a bit more pace anyway. They'll take what they could get. But I do think this was a result because of fortunate circumstances in their favour, rather than them having the car that suddenly decided to turn up.
Okay, let's take our final break on this episode. On the other side, we've got our moment of the race submissions. Welcome back. It's time for moment of the race. We do have some Discord submissions that we will get through in a little bit. But before we get there, of course, myself and Sam have our own submissions. So Sam, you can start.
Well, for me, it's quite a long one, I suppose, but it's that entire last segment of the Grand Prix. Whilst this Silverstone Grand Prix might be a 9 or 10 out of 10, to be honest, it really was a fantastic Grand Prix. That battle in the pit lane, the fight between Hamilton, Norris and Verstappen, and then Hamilton's emotion coming around to win that Grand Prix, his first for 2.5 years, as we mentioned. I think that was a Formula One moment, and I think that's what we watch the sport for. I think that's what, same with Norris's first win earlier on in the season, right? The same as when Piastri gets his, which will eventually come. Those, when Charles won at Monaco, these are the kind of moments that we live and breathe Formula One for. And if you've gone on Twitter, you'll see that even I was welling up at it. It was a brilliant moment for sport. So that entire segment and his message and the way he was hugging his mum and dad and everything, that for me was the moment of the race. It was a really lovely moment.
Absolutely shameless plug on this as well, but it's the sort of race that in 10 years' time we'll be including in our polls for what historic race we watch, right, as part of our Patreon offering. Like, it's that sort of classic that we'd look back on. My moment of the race is something far less serious.
Good.
My moment of the race. So we're getting down. It's actually somewhat related to yours. So we're in the dying stages of this incredibly exciting, incredibly emotional Grand Prix. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. Max Verstappen is bearing down on the 2 leaders. He's overtaken Lando Norris. Is he going to get Lewis Hamilton? Is he going to get within DRS of Lewis Hamilton? Are we going to get a fight right to the line? TV director, we need to show Rowan Atkinson.
Mr. Bean himself is sat there.
Really? Could you not have done that on lap 10?
He's been there the old time.
Seriously? I thought that was very fun. Like, nice to see you, Rowan, but what are you doing? I'd like to watch some racing.
Hello.
We do have some submissions from our Discord members, and because Harry's not here, we'll have Sam do the honours of playing them.
Right, folks, give me a minute. It's going to take me a mo to work out where everyone is, and we have to do a silly share of our screen because we haven't got Harry's soundboard. So here we go. I've got to find the first one, which I don't know. Oh, okay, here we go, folks. I've nailed it. Here we go. Submissions. First up, it's Woody.
What's going on, fellas? It's your boy Woody from the Omaha in North Carolina, USA. Moment of the race has to be at the end of the race, actually, when the guys on the podium were all in the room and Lewis is ragging on Max, calling him a ball hog for keeping him off the podium for 2.5 years. Love the bands between the boys. Keep working late.
I actually love that. I thought that was such a great line from Lewis Hamilton. Who would you hear calling someone a ball hog in Formula One? That's such a great line.
It's very Hamilton, though, isn't it?
It's very British, yeah. And of course, we've got live show attendee ×2, Sebalicious, and it will be Sebalicious again. So, hello, Sebalicious. Let's see what you have to say.
Hi, you sexy people. Man of the race is pretty obvious. It's my emotional support human being, Lewis Hamilton. I love you. And, George DNFing just a cherry on top, innit? Right, adios.
Oh, and a little extra.
Also, part 2, it's coming home!
Brilliant. Good stuff.
I'd tell you what, I'm not on board yet with the double submission trend that we've got going on. I'm not quite there with it.
Oh,
maybe I can be swayed, but I'm not at the moment.
Got a late converter from Ben Hawking. Let's see if he can get on board. Of course, coming up next is Mr. Sangman.
Hey, late breaking. Long-time listener, first-time caller, all that kind of stuff. I'm going to go with a little bit of a different moment because I'm sure a lot of people are going to say Lewis. I'm going to go with George's car just deciding that it was done just halfway through the race. I'm sure. I think Joy just flew a little bit too close to the sun with her under pressure prediction at the live show. Anyway, love the podcast, guys. Bye.
This is on you, Joy.
Never thought I'd say this, but to quote Uncle Ben, with great power becomes great responsibility. And Joy, I think you mucked that one up for him. It's all on you entirely. I hope you take it personally. Coming up next is Tim.
Hi boys, Tim here from the grandstand at Turn 1. Moment of the race was the battle between Yuki Tsunoda and Fernando Alonso. I don't think it was shown on the screens, but it was amazing. And also, Lewis won, get in. Bye.
Always cool to have a message sent in from someone at the track. I don't think we've got any more of those. Definitely not coming up later on.
Nope, no time for that.
No time at all. A friend of the show and someone we met at our fan zone down when we were at Williams last year, a big Albon fan who brought me whirly bars. It's Jeff One.
Jeff One here, first time submitter, previous whirly bar donator, moment of the race. The GOAT, he's back. Lewis win. Shout out to Alex Albon. Getting points in the Brexit means Brexit car. Oh.
We love that Brexit car.
It's a very Brexity car, wasn't it?
A big old flag on the back of that one, wasn't there? I love that we can't have a national flag because we will just look at it and go, no, awful, represents terrible things. Harry's microwave beep beep is here, but not Harry. So thank you, Harry's microwave beep beep, for making an appearance.
Harry's microwave here, FTLT. Moment of the race was obviously Lewis just sobbing on the radio because that was really adorable and it made me cry, which made my husband think I'm ridiculous. Anyway, thanks for the podcast. Bye.
We don't think you're ridiculous.
No. I love the double take there of I thought it was going to be the husband started crying as well, but it's no.
Yeah, I know. That's savage, isn't it?
Yeah.
I cried, and so my husband thought I was ridiculous. Like, brilliant. Cheers for mocking me in my tenderest moments. Scythe Lucifer. It's a very dark name, Scythe Lucifer, but it's good to have you.
This is Scythe from Texas here, first time submitter. My moment of the race has to go to Nico Hulkenberg, beating yet again Charles Leclerc and the Ferrari. I mean, what are we doing, Charles Leclerc? You're losing to your customer team again for the second time. Not even in the points again, But great job to Haas and great job to Nico Hulkenberg for beating the Ferrari and being the second fastest Ferrari powered car. Even mentioned by the commentators yet again. Great job.
Love that. Love that. I mean, the Haas deserve some love, right? They were great. Well, half of them were.
Yeah, sure.
Good. Good, sure. Emma Scott, next up.
Hi everyone, Emma from Scotland here. I finally stopped crying, so thought it would be a good time to do my moment of the race. At the risk of copying everyone else, I have to say that the moment of the race was Lewis Hamilton winning and me crying, everyone in the Discord crying, everyone on the TV crying, Lewis crying, his dad crying. Very emotional, very lovely. Hope everyone else enjoyed it as much as I did. Okay, thanks guys. Love the podcast. Bye.
There you go. The nation is crying.
Everyone is crying.
The world is crying. What a silly little sport we all love. A short and sweet one coming at the end here. It's Kronenberg, which is a beer or a cider, I think.
Lewis Hamilton.
I love that. That's great.
Actually, a massive McLaren fan, and he's talking about when Hamilton was overtaken for the lead.
That'll be it.
Yeah.
Who is he overtaking? Lewis Hamilton. Brilliant. Oh, do I have to do this one, Ben?
What one?
There's another guy here who is something to do with the show, apparently.
No, I don't believe that. Well, how many seconds is the submission?
32. He's over the limit.
Oh, okay. Well, that's done then.
I guess we won't be playing it. Good stuff.
Right. No, go on then.
Oh, he's even got capturing it, Smug Harry.
Goodness me, I love the smell of yet another bold prediction that's right. Hello, yes, it's Smug Harry here. Sorry I'm not on the podcast, but I am indeed at Silverstone. My moment of the race is undoubtedly Lewis Hamilton winning because it made me right again, which quite frankly is unbelievable. From the grandstand, I've actually no idea what happened in that race. It was carnage. The only thing I remember is Alex Albon's dirty move around the outside of Stowe. Hello boys, hope you're well. See you soon.
Can I tell him to bugger off? Is that all right?
I think you kind of already have in asking the question, but sure.
Good. Bugger off.
I'm actually bringing in a new rule to bold predictions from now on. In the same way that if Sam, I ask you a question. If you get this question right, Sam, you win £20,000. You get the question right, surely that only counts if you come and collect the £20,000 from me. Harry's not here to collect this bold prediction point, okay? Doesn't count. That's my new rule.
I still can't remember. Was Hamilton to win his bold prediction?
Yeah, I think so.
Honestly, he should have put money on that.
You know what? He probably didn't.
Maybe he would have won 20,000. Maybe he could have bought late breaking out.
I bet he kicked him out of his fantasy team whilst also predicting it.
I think I was say Lewis Hamilton. I think Harry's fantasy team's just got nothing in it. I think it's just an empty paddock.
Well, we'll get to talk to him about it tomorrow, as we're recording this actually on a Monday. But we will be back midweek, Sam.
We will be back midweek, but first up, we've got Power Rankings. So if you want to be a Patreon member, then, check it out. Link is in the description. You get loads of extra content. You get extra episodes. You get Power Rankings. You get Viewer Breaking. You get the historic thing that we do every single month. You also get a birthday shout out on the month of your birthday. So for those July birthday babies, it's coming up pretty quick for you. 20 days, and then we'll give you a good old birthday shout out. So thanks for all your support anyway. Thanks for supporting the Twitch stream that we're doing as well. Loads of stuff coming from us as well. We won't just stop because there's no races coming up. Obviously on those weekends, we're here every single week, all the time, every time. What a day it's been. In the meantime, I've been Samuel Sage.
And I've been Ben Hocking. And remember, keep breaking late.